Okay, let's be real for a second. When you hear the word poetry, what pops into your head? Maybe something you had to suffer through in high school, something kind of dusty and irrelevant. Well, what if I told you that over 400 years ago, one guy laid out what might be the most passionate, most brilliant defense of storytelling ever written? Yeah, let's get into it. So, this is the big question. It's really the accusation at the heart of this whole story. I mean, today we might think of storytelling as just, entertainment. But back then, this charge was way more serious. A lot of people genuinely believed poetry was, at best, a totally pointless distraction. And this was not some stuffy academic debate either. In Elizabethan England, poetry's reputation was in the gutter. Seriously, it was seen as trivial, as dishonest, and even as immoral. So this courtier, soldier, and poet, a guy named Sir Philip Sidney, he decides to step up and basically act as its defense lawyer. His case? An apology for poetry. Now, Sidney's first move is pure genius. Instead of just arguing against the charges, he completely flips the script. He redefines the entire debate by asking one simple question: what is a poet, really? And his answer goes way back to the classics. First, he looks to the Romans. They called their poets vatis, and that didn't just mean writer. It meant a seer, a prophet, someone with this incredible, unique vision who could see these deep truths about the world that the rest of us just miss. But wait, he doesn't even stop there. He then goes to the Greeks, who called a poet a poetes, which literally means maker. And this is such a brilliant point. The poet isn't just someone who copies the world as it is. No way. The poet is a creator, a maker, who can imagine worlds that are actually better than our own, building whole new realities from nothing but imagination. So here's the takeaway. Sidney says poetry is a speaking picture. Think about that. It's not just a bunch of abstract words on a page. It's a vivid image that speaks right to our minds, right to our hearts. And it has this dual purpose: to teach us how to be good, and to do it in a way that is just completely, utterly delightful. Okay, so with his definition locked in, Sidney calls his star witness to the stand: poetry itself. And he's about to put it in a head-to-head showdown against its two biggest rivals when it comes to explaining the world: philosophy and history. What's so cool about this is how Sidney breaks it all down. He says, look, philosophy over here on the left, it gives you the abstract idea of what virtue is, but it's kind of wordy-ish and dry. It doesn't really make you want to do anything. Then you've got history in the middle. It gives you real-world examples, sure, but reality's messy, right? Its heroes are always flawed, but poetry? Poetry can take the philosopher's perfect idea and give it a body, creating a perfect, compelling character. It teaches us by showing us an ideal we can actually aim for. And this is my absolute favorite analogy in the whole essay. Sidney says that learning from a philosopher is like trying to choke down some bitter medicine. Ugh. But learning from a poet, that's like taking a medicine of cherries. It gives you all the moral goodness, but it tastes amazing. It makes you want to be a better person. All right, so Sidney has built this incredible case for what poetry is and why it's so powerful. Now he's ready to face the prosecution head on. He's about to systematically take apart the four main charges from the poet haters of his day. Let's watch him dismantle their case one charge at a time. First up, we've got the classic accusation, right? The idea that all this rhyming and metaphor doesn't really serve any practical purpose. And so it's just a complete and total waste of time. Sidney's comeback here is so powerful. He basically just asks, what could possibly be a better use of our time than learning how to be a good person? I mean, if poetry has this unique power to move us toward virtue, then it's not just not a waste of time, it's the absolute opposite of a waste. So the prosecution's next charge is one you've probably heard before. It's that poets are, well, just liars. Yeah, the argument is that poets just make stuff up, right? They fill our heads with these fantasy stories about things that never, ever happened. Okay, Sidney's defense here is so clever. He says, look, to tell a lie, you first have to be claiming to tell the truth. A historian says, here's what happened. A poet never says that. A poet says, hey, come with me into this world I imagined. Since they never promise that their stories are literal facts, they literally cannot lie. They're dealing in a different, higher kind of truth. The third charge gets a little more serious. This is the claim that poetry doesn't just waste our time, it actually messes with our morals. by stirring up our passions, leading us astray, and basically making us worse people, not better.
And here, Sidney turns their own argument right back at them. He basically says, you're right. Poetry is incredibly powerful. It really can move people. But that power is just a tool. You don't blame medicine because it can be used as a poison, right? No, you celebrate its power to heal. So if poetry has the power to do harm, just imagine its even greater power to do good.
And now for the final charge. This is the big one. This is the prosecution's supposed knockout punch. They pull out their ultimate trump card.
The fact that the great Plato himself, the father of Western philosophy, kicked all the poets out of his ideal society. I mean, if Plato wanted them gone, how could poetry possibly be a good thing? But Sidney, with this brilliant rhetorical twist, just steals their best witness. He argues that everybody's been reading Plato wrong. He says Plato wasn't kicking out the kind of poet Sidney's talking about, the one who teaches virtue. No, Plato was only banishing the abusers of the art, the poets who spread lies about the gods and corrupted the youth. So get this, Plato wasn't an enemy of poetry, he was just an enemy of bad poetry. So, after this masterclass of a defense, Sidney closes with this playful little threat. He reminds all the critics out there that poets have the ultimate superpower, immortality through their words. He warns them that if they keep hating on poetry, they might not just be forgotten by time, they might find themselves being made fun of in sonnets for all eternity. Sidney's defense is more relevant now than it has ever been. His poetry is our movies, our songs, our novels, our TV shows. We are literally surrounded by speaking pictures. The question he leaves for us 400 years later is, which ones are we choosing? In this age of just endless content, what's a story that's not just delighting you, but is actually teaching you and moving you to be better?